I think we bandy these terms around, customer, etc. So what I thought we'd do is, if you could each introduce yourselves, and but at the same time, we've got a kind of fundamental question in the heart of all of it, is what do we mean by customer when we use this term customer? So maybe, what do you mean by it? What's your company mean by it? But what are we trying to get out of the word customer? So maybe I'll start with you, Joost, in terms of what's a customer anyway, and who are you? You're my customer right now.
All right. Well, I'm Joost Vermeulen. I'm the regional director for Booking.com based here in London, looking after the northern part of Europe. And the customer for us is actually the traveler that is booking, that is looking to book. That's where we are optimizing for, to make that experience for that customer as best as possible. So,
Virginia, it's a good question for you.
Hello, I'm Virginia Stuart-Taylor. I'm a travel writer and blogger at the Postcard.com. So the customer for me is my audience, my readership. So the people I'm writing for, the people who need the information on where they want to travel, how they want to spend their free time, their annual leave. So that's my customer.
And we deliberately wanted to get a real traveller. We had to kind of catch them in a box and bring them to the stage so that we've actually got representation from the people that we're serving here. So thank you for coming, Virginia. Andy, who's the customer here?
For me, it's anyone who's looking for a holiday or a trip or a car online. And they don't have to be your customer. They're someone who's come to your site or your app or your mobile and is comparing things. And we're trying to work out what they want.
And your company? Sorry?
It's called BD for Travel, and we do predictive analytics and machine learning for the travel industry.
And BD's big data, isn't it? I had to...
Indeed.
Yep, there you go. And Francois?
Yeah, hi, I'm working for Accor Hotel. And in Accor Hotel, we have just changed our business model. So now we have 3 types of customers. The guests, that's what we call the guests, the hoteliers, and our owners, because we are now in an asset-light model. And we have to satisfy those 3 types of customers.
Okay, thank you very much. So, yep, customer. It's always all about the customer, but it's not working. We all know that because we're also customers of the travel industry, and when we try and do things, it's never quite as slick as we'd like it to be. But maybe if we just do it in the same order, what problem are we trying to solve here when we're trying to actually engage with the customer? What's the bridge? What's the chasm we're trying to cross? Post.
Sure.
To you.
The customer is really at center at what we do at Booking.com. And our aim is to take out the friction out of travel for them. And we do that through technology. We're a technology company in travel, not a travel company in technology, but really a technology company. And we try to look into the latest technologies and how that can help us taking out that friction out of the customer journey. And that can be many examples on how we look at our creatives for our marketing campaigns if we enter a new market or a new country, to look into the data and see like, okay, what is of the interest of the customer. Also in creating recommendations, individual recommendations for customers. So not we're promoting one destination to you all. No, we look at where's your preference. We look into the data, and based on that we try to personalize the offering that we have for you.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but from Booking.com's perspective, you're kind of pushing on an open door. You're clearly solving a problem because your growth has been quite spectacular. So whatever you're doing, something's going quite right in terms of the problem you're solving right now.
Well, yeah, but I think the problem is bigger than just booking an accommodation, and that's also where we're focused nowadays on. We really want to see all the parts of the trip, so it's not only searching the destination and booking it, but it's also once you're there, how do you get to your hotel, for example, or your apartment that you booked? And then once you're there, what do you want to do in the city or destination where you're there? You want to experience something, you want to go to a museum, you want to go to a nice restaurant, and all of that is what we're working on and trying to bring together on one platform.
Mm-hmm. So, Virginia, you're the customer. What's not working?
At the moment, there's just a complete overload of information, and that does make personalization really important, but also it's building up the trust in the website. I'm not going to look at, say, an aggregator and I know that it's picked up certain elements of me, but it can't know every single aspect about me, or at least I don't believe it does. So there needs to be a way of really sort of targeting the individual thing that one customer is looking for. For me, I know that my audience is basically exactly me. So somebody of my age, my background, my location normally, so I can target my writing, my reviews to exactly what that person wants. But it's really hard if you're on an enormous platform when you want to target and tailor to so many different segments of customer.
It's an interesting question because while we're on the topic, let's just bring up GDPR for a moment. You just said you don't know everything about me, but do you want them to know everything about you? Where would you draw the line as a younger person? Because maybe us old fogies see it differently. So where would you draw the line in terms of privacy?
So myself and most of the people I know are not too worried about companies having our data, because the data out there is not my really personal data. It's characteristics about me that help me to book a hotel that's actually going to deliver benefit back to me. I know that differs by country as well, massively. It differs by culture. But I think because we've grown up in a very sort of data-intensive world, and we do see the benefit of that data being used to help us as well, I'm personally open to it being used to
Andy,
personalize.
too much data. Isn't that your happiest day? I mean, that's what you're all about.
Absolutely. I think you have to see it in the context of the evolution of travel sites, effectively. And I think the first phase was travel sites were a window into a GDS. So massive aggregation of product, and you had a window into that. But it wasn't at all geared to what a customer wanted. The next phase, there wasn't enough content in that, so people would bring all sorts of content together, like hotels, in a better way, and provide a window into that. I think the third phase was segmenting things a bit for customers. And the fourth phase is really getting down to understanding what customers want and trying to put the right product in front of them. But we're quite stuck in the first three phases and haven't really moved into the fourth phase yet. And I think that's as much to do with technology as to do with existing business models. And the very best practice that you get at the moment on websites, for example, is to do A/B testing, which by definition means you select half of the audience and a site, you choose which one performs better, and you stick that in front of everyone else. So you're making the site, by definition, more and more suitable for the average person. And actually, that's quite tough. It's good practice in many ways, but our sites are currently structured for average people, and very few people want to be an average.
That does preempt the follow-up question I was going to ask, which is where would you see the industry on this journey? But if that's a four-stage journey, you're saying people are stuck at stage 3, or are they actually
stuck between stage 2 and 3 a lot of the time? But if you start to take the blue pill of personalization, it takes a long time to do it, but you move away from a segment or a average approach. And I think we're still a few years away from most companies doing that.
Okay, thank you. And Francois, I think what's really interesting is when you look at it from an organization that's actually delivering this stuff perspective, because you're actually the front lines of this. I know conversations I've had with organizations such as yours, they say you've got no idea how hard it is to make this sort of change inside our organization. But with that in mind, where do you see the challenge in terms of actually connecting with the customer, and where are you on your journey?
I think that the challenge for us is really to bring the data inside the hotel itself and inside the experience at the hotel level. I think I'm slightly more optimistic on where we stand in terms of e-commerce, digital part, on the first part of the journey of the customer. Where do I have to look to find the hotel? Where do I have to book, etc.? The app, the customers are quite used to that. Where we have a lot to learn and a lot to build still now is at the hotel level, where we have to provide the best and the most personalized experience to the customers, and to try to use the data I will agree to give us, and to see what we can do with that. And as soon as we will reach that step, then we will hook the customers, and he will be satisfied by coming in our hotels. I think that's really the key challenge for us, helped by all the loyalty programs, and I'm talking for Accor Hotel, but I think that I'm talking for all the different companies, where we can learn a lot from the customers just to provide him the perfect experience that he is expecting to live.
So interesting, you mentioned loyalty programs. I'm looking at Virginia as well, because I was just reading something that said loyalty programs are for the kind of older generation of people, and younger people tend to be much more fickle. So they might have every loyalty card, but they're not necessarily, oh, well, I always fly with Virgin, therefore I'm going to carry on. It's a much more diverse thing. Are you coming across that?
Well, what we know is what people are saying and what people are doing. And on the loyalty program, it's kind of a case that everybody says, I don't like to have a loyalty program, too many, etc. But as soon as you stop the loyalty program, then they disappear. So we all love loyalty programs. We all love points, soft benefits. We don't say it, but reality is that we love it. So we will continue. We will reinvent the loyalty programs like lots of different players on the market. But we will continue because it's one of the key assets of the relationship that you build with your customers.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, if I get this right, yeah, customers are very important, but at the moment it's all about the data so far. And I'm wondering, I think you're a very, Joost, you're a very online organization, let's say, and therefore, yes, you're going to see it in terms of data and so on and so forth. But a question for you as a newer company, older companies tend to be all about the process, and they're working out how to do the data. If you're all about the data, what are you learning about the kinds of processes you need to wrap around that?
I think the data really shows where the customer's interest is, and we use data to define our direction and our strategy, and the data is being used throughout all departments, and that's not only the technology department, but it's also customer service, that's also my teams that are looking after the partners we work with. We all use data to see like where does it make most sense to approach a partner for something, or to see what are the next trends for customers. And then all our products teams within the company, they get the freedom to experiment and work with that. So we do everything with testing. It's not that someone comes with a new idea on how to improve the process. Well, that happens, of course, as well, but then we test it first. So we put it to test, we measure, and we learn how our customers or partners are interacting with that new functionality. And based on that, we decide to move forward. And that's what we do on a daily basis with over 1,000 A/B tests that are running on our website, just to learn if what we think is also really what people are using. Comes back to your point as well. And I think that's super important to really measure the impact of how you use that data, and not purely use data as making a decision to change something. You need to also measure the impact, and see if it is indeed helping, and if customers are more happy, or if partners are easier to work with in that way.
So I'm going to push this to Andy as well. You speak to a lot of companies, you're helping companies use your platform and so on, and you provide this thing. What challenges do you find you have to address first when companies, because we can all say, yeah, we need to do better things with data, that's great, and then the hard stuff starts. So what does the hard stuff look like, and what are the first hurdles you need to get over?
I think the first one's a mental block. It's a bit like trying to lose weight or get fit. You can do a lot less in the short term than you hope, but a lot more in the long term. So if
You've seen my training log, haven't you?
I have. Well, we were guessing afterwards, yeah. And I think it's very much the same with something as fundamental as personalization. You have to get in there and learn, and the first results may not be killers. But that doesn't mean you stop and give up. You've just got to keep going, and you get layer on layer of results. But if CEOs or CMOs will only do projects that are home runs, you can't do the moonshots. And so you've got to set out with a vision of your engagement with a customer being good and personalized. And I think that's what someone like Booking does. They're endlessly testing, not just to get better data, because they've got a vision of delivering something personal to the customer. And so they're going in a particular direction. And you will, in the shorter term, probably not have spectacular results. But if you just keep going with a methodology to get there, over a year, over 2 years, you'll have really good results. But more importantly, you'll have educated the whole company to think in terms of how do we address people as people instead of data, instead of averages. And one of our clients we went to, and they had a cardboard cutout in the corner that they called Martin, to remind them that the click streams were people. And what we try and do is turn that click stream back into individuals so that they can almost see what people are after in real time. And just by doing that kind of thing, you start to create a change. But I'd say the first thing is, don't expect results in 3 weeks. Think a year, 2 years, and put in place programs that will make the changes. Because if you go to the gym and then weigh yourself the next day, you're not going to really achieve your goals. But set out a personalization approach, because that's where the market is going. All your competitors will achieve this kind of thing over time, or at least the really successful ones will. But don't expect to crack it in week 3.
And are there examples of, you say there are no immediate home runs, but are there examples of areas that are easier doors to push against in terms of personalization?
I think you can personalize as deeply as your content is good. So if you've got 1,200 hotels in Mallorca and they all have a swimming pool, and that's all you can tell about them, there's no point personalizing. But if you've got really good, deep content data that you can tie to different kinds of people, then you can personalize. So we've had quite a few customers where we've looked at their data, and we've said to them, really, your data strategy, your content strategy has to improve before you can even think about personalizing, because you can't understand why that person likes this or that hotel. And our view is people don't really know what they want until they start comparing things. And you've got to make it easy to compare. And if your site is really bad at letting people compare things, it's very, very hard to make any progress. So we start really with understanding your content, understanding how deep you can go, and then understanding what different groups of people do on your site and what individuals do. And I think it starts with measuring what people do. And I used to run a big travel distribution company in Europe, and none of our clients really could tell you why someone did something on a site. And I think we all need to ask that question. Why did someone choose that and not that? Why did they like that and not that? And not just treat people as thousands of people coming to my site every day, I'll throw things in front of them and hope something happens.
There's a massive, there were 3 things woven in there, if I may. There was the segmentation aspect, there was the customer engagement aspect, and then there was the content aspect, all of which need to kind of, we could draw a picture of that, right? Francois, you have multiple very different kinds of segments. You've got the luxury, you're managing the luxury end, you're also managing the integration of various parts of the hotel group from a lower level integration perspective. So all of these, is this how you're thinking about it, with the segmentation, with the engagement, with the content, or how are you working through these challenges?
Yeah, I think there is one super interesting point on what has been said before. I think that data and dataization, if I can say, cost a fortune. So you don't do personalization just for a short-term basis. You do personalization and data management for a long-term vision. And inside that, all the policy there and the strategy you are going to put in place must fit the different brands that you have. We have a portfolio of different brands, and each brand has its own data strategy. We are working with segment, and linked to each segment, we treat and we manage the data, the one that we ask to the customers and the one that we will deliver to the customers, on completely different manners. And the access to the information is also completely different. We know that one of our luxury segments also goes to the mid-scale segment. On mid-scale, you will not have access to the same level of information that, even for the same customer, than the access that you will have when the same customer will go on the luxury brand. Because the service that we will deliver will be different. This is the way we are handling the segment and the data, by brand and by depth of information that we want to get.
And that does link back to the engagement
Correct.
area as well. So Virginia, from your perspective, I mean, you do spend a lot of time booking things. I mean, how much do you feel that these problems are being solved, or is it still just you feel a slave to the booking machine?
It's getting easier, definitely. The quantity of choice out there is growing, and that does make things more complex. And I think actually there's an argument for, through personalization, narrowing the options that are presented to somebody so that they then have fewer, not so much of a bombardment of, I don't know what to choose, so I just won't choose anything. It is definitely getting easier, but I do find that as a customer, as a person booking an aspect of travel, you have to be quite savvy, and you have to pick up, there are tips you pick up just to get through the booking part before you've even got to the destination. And that's something that I don't think everyone has. So I've been sort of writing about travel for a long time, so I think I've picked up quite a lot of these sort of
So you
hacks.
have to become your own
But
travel
not everyone
agent.
has that, yeah. And so some people will just follow the one advice they've been given from one person. I think the role of influencers, writers, celebrities even, I think that is somehow missed as well in this conversation about data as well, because that and the sort of word of mouth and of recommendation from somebody you know in person is hugely important, but the systems at the moment possibly don't account for that. Because there's so much choice, when you do have one recommendation from one person you know and trust in real life,
You just do it.
that can override
That's
the
really
very complex algorithm that a website has put together. The algorithms definitely help, and it makes it a lot easier, but it's also important to recognize the real person aspect to it as well. I'm not booking in isolation.
I want to pivot on that point and start looking a little bit to the future. And I recognise that we've got a great blend of organisations here. So one of the issues that we're coming up against, and we have a whole session on it tomorrow, but I want to touch on it now, is where does a person actually start to broker that trust? So if you become your own travel agent, but equally Booking.com is providing some of that service. Francois, you're saying that you're actually providing different levels of service based on different brands that you're presenting, but then sometimes you're working through third parties, etc. It is all about that underlying. So I've put three people on the spot, but I'm going to look at you, Andy. And how do organizations reach different kinds of service to different kinds of people when they're not working in isolation? They're actually working through a series of third parties to the ultimate customer where there is so much choice.
It's very difficult. I think one of the things that will change over time is who owns the profile of the customer. And at the moment, everyone's trying to own their own profile. And I think we'll see some shared profiles coming up, and customers owning their own profile and giving access to that. So a bit like you have credit scores, and at the moment Experian owns my credit score, but I can see it. But there's a kind of objective third party who owns my profile. And I think people will start to want to own their own profiles and give people access to those profiles. And when that happens, sharing data will be a lot easier. Obviously, some of the bigger players, historically the GDSs, wanted to own the profile. But I think a lot of how we let things work seamlessly between companies comes down to interoperability of profiles, of technology standards, and so on. There's a load of work behind the scenes that has to happen for some of that. But I think having a vision of how do we get our organization ruthlessly focused on making it frictionless for the customer is the only way for an individual organization to work. I think it makes it hard because quite often with a company like Booking, you will have to set up quite strong walls around it, and that can bounce people off it. And I think the ownership of that customer profile is where we will see the big fights between the big portals like the Amazons, the Googles, and the Bookings come through. And the question will be, will that be something that each company owns, or do we all buy into an Amazon profile or an Apple profile or a Google profile?
Maybe a host, from your perspective, in terms of, are you going to be sharing profiles anytime soon? Is there?
Well,
Or you just want to?
GDPR-wise, that's another question. But what I would like to touch on is the trust. I think that's super important, and with technology, that can really help that trust. But for example, if we look at machine learning and bots answering the questions of a customer, I think we should do that only when it really makes sense. So if you have a simple question on adding a bed to the room or asking if there's a parking space available, probably you would want to interact with the bot and have instant answer instead of sending an email and waiting a day to get a reply. But if your flight is stuck, you're at the airport and you cannot reach your destination, you probably don't want to talk to a bot, but you want to talk to a human on the phone that's helping you out with your real issue. And I think that's where we really have to make that combination of technology, but also keep that trust in that human interaction that is also needed to throughout the experience of a traveler. And I think that's where, we try at Booking.com at least to bring those two things together and see where can we, when is a customer interested in technology or in talking to a bot, and when do we really need to just pick up the phone and help them?
Okay. Francois, Accor into the future and the delivery.
I think that the trust that the customers are just the trust of the value on that the customer is ready to pay for. Particularly on the luxury segment that I'm heading, the higher the trust is, the best the relationship will be, and the coming back of the customers will be certain. And this is really something that we are investing, and this is something we build our future on the trust that we are creating with our customers, for sure.
And you don't see undermining of that? I mean, you can have all the trust in the world, but then trust is going elsewhere as well. Are you still holding your customers in your hand?
Well, we try to, and I think that the most important is the clarity that you can offer to your customers. As far as the customer knows what you are going to do with their data or its data, then there is no problem, there is no issue, except if you go, of course, on the extremes, but that's never the case. So, as far as you announce to the customer, this is exactly what I'm going to do with your data, if you agree, then that's perfect. We have no issue or no problem. And that depends a lot also on the market where you are. In the US, the notion of trust is radically different of the one that we have in China, for example, or in Europe. And we need to be aligned with the expectation of all those different customers.
Okay, thank you. Can I just check, are we up on time or are we opening for questions? We've got time for one question, if anyone's got a question out there in the audience. Otherwise, I've got my wrap-up question, which I'll go to. That's fine. We'll go straight to the wrap-up question. So, wrap-up question for you. We'll just go down the room. If there was one piece of advice you could give any organisation that's trying to engage better with customers, doing what's possible today, what would that one piece of advice be? To you first, host.
Think really like which part of which friction you want to take out, and see how you can do that by using technology and test it.
Okay, do Michelangelo. Fantastic. Virginia.
I think it would be to treat everyone as individuals and unique, give them a unique experience. Nobody wants to have the same trip as 10,000 other people. Try and present them with a unique opportunity or experience. To,
make personalisation personal.
To something to show off, for them to show off about, that they're doing this one unique thing, that's what everybody wants.
Thank you. Andy?
Don't think in terms of averages.
Don't think in terms of averages. And Francois, last word.
Where do you create your value? And just target on that and collect most data on where you create your value.
So if I'm hearing that right, it's focus, 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 and focus. Thank you very much to our panel. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.